Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. As people are trickling in, just take a moment, locate the chat area in the bottom of your screen. We've got an amazing guest today, so I know you're going to have some questions, and there's also reactions, chat, questions. So we're all ready for you. So welcome to today's CASEpeer Conversations webinar. I'm Gabriela Cubeiro, the CEO and co-founder of CASEpeer. And today I'm really excited to welcome Nalini Prasad, the Chief Strategy Officer of BluShark Digital, one of the leading digital marketing agencies for law firms in the country. And if you've been to a legal conference in the last 5 years, you've probably had a chance to see or BluShark's founder, Seth Price. Now, Nalini is so knowledgeable about all things digital marketing, in particularly Google, and I really couldn't be more excited to have her here as our guest today. So welcome, Nalini.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be on your webinar finally. I know we've been trying to organize it for a while, and it's a good time because Google's doing all sorts of crazy things right now. That my presentations are changing from literally 1 week to the next, and just being like, "This is what happened last week, and now look what Google has done." And so maybe we don't know what's happening. So lots of fun stuff to share today.
Well, and it's a good reminder for us to do these marketing webinars more often. And I know that you're presenting so often on the road, but still to be able to have these conversations, just because for those of you joining us today, just because you had the chance to watch Nalini talk about Google and obviously we're going to get into some specifics today, but if you saw her speak a couple weeks ago, months ago, or a year ago, you're going to be hearing new information. And it's always important to stay on top of these things because Google's changing things up faster than ever. So Nalini, tell us a little bit about yourself and about your role and about BluShark in generally for those people that may not be familiar.
Yeah, so you kind of give us a good introduction there in terms of we're an agency for digital marketing, but we focus on law firms only. We actually spun out of a law firm ourselves. So Seth Price, you've heard, he's the founder of BluShark Digital, is also the managing partner of his own law firm here in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. We basically were the in-house team in the basement of Price Benowitz for a number of years and helped scale him from 2 to 40 lawyers. And then after that, he said, well, you know what, if I could do this for my firm, I could probably do this for firms across the country. Being the entrepreneurial mindset, more of the business management side of a law firm, he said, well, let's take this out. Let's make it its own agency, see what happens. Spoke around the country and kind of took the same exact pieces that we used to scale his firm, which are very, very, very heavily focused on local SEO, right? So your Google business profile, choosing to put your offices in the right locations, meaning fruitful locations where you don't have a lot of competitors, but there are a lot of people who need your services, kind of taking those types of strategies and then applying them to firms across the country. So we started out, in the basement of Price Benowitz, and now we are about 100 employees. We service over 200 law firms across the country. And then my role has kind of been figuring out what Google is doing at all times, staying ahead of the curve, making sure that in our 4 departments and the 4 items that Google looks for, technical, content, links, and local, that we're always one step ahead to make sure that our clients are not being hit by those algorithm updates and things like that. So I get to do all the nerdy fun stuff and geek out over all these changes all the time and then speak about them at all these conferences that I may have seen you at.
I love it. I love it. So listen, I had so much fun marketing this webinar because here we are talking 2023 in September. I've got some thoughts on this.
Oh my gosh.
Why do you think it's so important that we're talking about 2023 already?
It's so funny because with certain industries, your life is always 4 months in advance, right? I can tell you right now, and I have kids, and I'm sure a lot of you listening have kids, and so like, oh, my best friend's kid's 5th birthday party or 1st birthday party, the big ones are planned. You know when the birthday is, right? Obviously, but you're like, all right, well, that's in February, so that's that Saturday. For us in the legal industry, my conferences are planned through next August. I know what dates I'm traveling already. I already know that I have to be talking about different things. And in the digital industry itself, you are always planning for the next algorithm updates. So when we're creating content, we're thinking about content that's going to be good for 6 months from now, right? So in my head, I am never thinking about what's happening this particular month. I'm planning for the next quarter, especially, right? And as you look at your KPIs, whether that is, how many intakes have I had, or how many employees have I retained this year, whatever it is to keep your business running in your ops, you're looking at numbers and growth and predicting the future, right? If you are in a growth mindset. So I would say that where we are right now, this end of the year, you get to holidays, you're about to approach a time maybe where the phones stop to ring as much, or you're not in the office as much. And every year we allow ourselves to sit there and say, shoot, this is a bad month. But you knew this bad month was coming, right?
It's coming
So
every
my
year.
thing is, so my thing is, why don't we talk about that from maybe September and October at the beginning of that quarter, and how do we fix that bad month? What else could we be doing with our time to be productive?
Yeah. Yeah, and the other perspective is that if you're planning your 2023 strategy, December's too late. Get your ducks in a row now, and hopefully you'll reap those benefits in the end of November, December, but you're certainly going to be set up for success. And this goes hand in hand with what your goals are, not just your strategy. Be setting your 2020 goal now. Are you hitting your 2022 goals or not? What are you going to put in place, and what are you going to do differently for next year?
And I guess the other thing too is you guys are very specific to PI firms, right? And the majority of our clients are PI firms, where it's, someone who has a case, business to consumer. They're looking for something you're doing. But with PI especially, you don't get those settlements for 18 months sometimes, right? And so where you are right now, you've counted money from last year, right? Your settlements that are coming in right now are things that originated a while ago, or you already know basically what your 2022 is going to look like. You know what you want your 2023 to look like. I know for a fact that men and women at the top of their firms sit down and talk about what they want their money and their revenue to look like, but then they don't do the dotted lines underneath. What do I need to do to get it to the revenue that I want it to, right? We have our dream board, but how do you then put the actions in? And that's the piece that I want to
and that's such a good point. The PI delay from marketing to revenue generated is a long time. So what are some of the biggest changes you've seen from Google in the past year?
So Google's been doing a lot of things. There was a giant update last November, which we've seen kind of trickle in, and we've seen changes from that one update, kind of big and small, happen throughout the last 6 months, where if you lost rankings immediately in November and you were number one and all of a sudden you're on page 3 or nowhere, right? That means not much to a lot of people, other than, well, my phone stopped ringing. Right? If you are majorly getting your calls from online because you show, then taking an L in one of these algorithm updates is a big deal, because it's calls and it's money and it's cases signed, right? So if you were somebody who just all of a sudden stopped signing as many cases in November, you may have seen that your phones have started to ring a little bit more, or you've had some ups and downs in the last 6 months. And that's because Google what they did was they said, for all you big giant firms out there who are monopolizing your main city and all of the suburbs outside of your cities, right? There's not a lot of strong law firms in the suburbs. So you know what? I'm going to take your good, solid SEO site, and I'm going to show you to everybody. Google reined that in a little bit. And they said, we want to give everyone a bite at the apple, right? We want to make sure that the people with real office locations and with a different personality of their firm have an opportunity to shine as well, and that our consumers have more options and choices. That was the big overall what happened in November. So if you're one of those big firms,
Sorry, I was just going to say, essentially, if you're a firm in the suburbs, where there's obviously a leader or one or two leaders in the market of the main city, you might have seen more calls starting to come in because of that. Okay.
Yes. So the big guys were the ones who lost mostly in this update, and the smaller guys won, exactly like you said, because they started to show. Now the thing of that is were you a small guy who had no reviews, right? Because then Google did actually give you the opportunity to show, but a consumer is going to look at your Google business profile that's never been touched, and they're going to go down to the next person who has at least a couple, right? So this was the importance of, hey, oh, there's big guys in my market. I'll never have a chance. Like, why do I even care about reviews? Why do I care about keeping anything updated? Because here was your moment to shine, and because you did nothing, right, you lost that opportunity. And so it shows that you should always keep everything kind of updated, and you should try, even if there are the bigger guys, and even if you're not spending a ton of money in digital, because there is going to be a moment where Google does want consumers to have a fair and equal opportunity to choose from everybody out there, right? So we can talk about that too all day long, about what do you do if you did lose, and what do you do if you won? How do you can capitalize on that? Has it changed? But that's the biggest change that we've seen this year has been the monopoly being taken out of the picture.
Interesting. Well, I'm sure that shook it up. I'm sure a lot of people at conferences were buzzing about that. So what's a service area and why is it so important? And specifically here, we're talking, I think, about Google Local, right?
Yes, yes. And this has everything to do with what we just kind of talked about, actually. So the service areas were the answer to how do I get back into Google's good graces and spread my visibility around everywhere again. So what happened was Google created all these man-made Google markets, right? Where they divided, let's say Houston. Houston is big, it has a lot of little neighborhoods within it, so it's easy to use as an example. Houston used to just be, if you Googled something and you stood in North Houston or South Houston, right, you would see the same three results. It'd be the three firms who were killing it in Houston with their SEO. Now, because of these new markets that Google has created based on search volume, they say, hey, if there's enough search volume in this area of northern Houston, I'm going to give it a name to this neighborhood, and I'm going to make it its own little 3-pack. Now there's a ton of 3-packs throughout the whole of Houston proper, right, with these names. So it's important for you to know the names of these markets that Google's created, because they're called service areas. And on the back end of your Google business profile, what you can do is go in and you can add up to 20 service areas where you want Google to know, I would like to show in the 3-pack if possible, because I do service this demographic, this neighborhood, right?
And
Now, the beauty, yeah, go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry. Can I ask? So, because my first thought here is like, now, do these have to be, I'm assuming, close to your geographical location of the office that you have? Like, you can't just be like, and by the way, I also service that market and this market, whatever, 4-hour drive in the state of Texas.
Yes. So this is a great question, and the question that everybody should be asking. How do I choose the service areas that I list, right? And you hear from a lot of SEO folks that it's just simply wrong, that you will only ever rank up to a certain mileage away from your office location, whether that's 1 or 2 miles away, right? And that's not the way it works. The way that it works is you will only rank in locations where there are not necessarily other firms located if it's far away from your office. So I know that was a confusing statement. Let's say that a mile away from your office, there's a saturation of law firms, PI firms, right? If you made that your service area, you would not show in that space, because there are 10 other firms that are actually physically located there. If someone's standing in that service area, they're going to get someone that's right next to them, right? Now, let's say 15 miles away from, and we have this in DC. We use this as an example, and I'll liken it after. But now let's say 15 miles away from your office location is a small town where there are 0 PI law firms located physically in that neighborhood that Google has created as a service area, right? Somebody stands there and they say, a husband got hurt in a car accident, I need a lawyer. Google is not going to have someone physically located next to that searcher. So they're going to say, well, who is telling me that they actually service this area, right? And now they're going to look for the firms that have put, the service area. And if you're one of the first firms to put that service area and nobody else has recognized that or has done the research to see there aren't firms located there, you will show in a 3-pack 15 miles away from you.
So a good strategy is to pick markets or pick additional service areas that might be less saturated, essentially.
And that's where the work comes in, is actually going through and figuring out where are law firms located, looking at the Google map and understanding what service areas are, because they're not colloquial. It's not necessarily the same neighborhood name you would use, right, to define an area of your city. So there's a lot there, but that's for the big firms who lost. This is the best advice I have for you, is to go find those service areas where you were getting the most of your calls, that were outside of your city, right, where it was fruitful. See if there's any firms that are really there, or if they even have any reviews. If there are smaller firms that are showing but they have no reviews, it doesn't hurt for you to put a service area and be number 4, because people are going to see no review, no review, no review, more businesses, right? Then they're going to see big firms name number 4. You're probably still going to get calls.
And in a
and then if you're the small guy,
is it beneficial? Yeah, you'd still want to be there because you're still looking like a big dog, even if it's a click, right? Because you have all the reviews and the bandwidth.
Yeah, it's the fact of the matter is, if the 3-pack is terrible and it is local people, but it's a blank, there's no photos, there's not one review, right? You're not going to call that business. You're going to go down to the next one, right? So you can still look good with the service areas. Also thinking about maybe putting physical offices in those locations outside of the big city where you were getting tons of calls. Clearly, that is an area worth investing in.
Well, it's interesting. So this question is not that, but that's a fantastic answer to it too. Like, what can you do to make sure that the service areas are correct? Sometimes it's like set up an office. Actually, can we unpack that for 1 second, Nalini, before we jump in to this as well? Because obviously back in the day, people had like Regents was one. There were sort of these associations or companies that you could pay to give you an office location. I'm assuming that Google I've heard that they've really shut all that down. What are the policies out there? Is Google letting any of these shared spaces eke by still, or no?
Yeah, so this just happened this week. So everyone's pretty familiar with having to get the postcard, right? And Nalini always says there are the 6 check mark items, the smell test, making sure that it is a commercial office space, that you could meet somebody in the conference area, that there is a space for you to work in if you're going to office share. There's ways that you're not necessarily spending tons of money on an office space, but it is satellite for you, as long as it passes Google's actual rules, right? But recently, this past week, Google is moving away from the postcard. So the postcard used to be that you would say, this is my address. They would send a postcard in the mail with a pin on the back. You would put that pin into your account to show Google that you really had access to the mail at that location, right? That was their way of verifying that it was real. So they're moving away from that, and they're making you do a video now, which the video has always kind of been around as a second step if the postcard didn't show up. But now making that primary means that it is going to be easier to get yourself verified, because Google will be able to see it's real. It's hitting all my things, right? I think it's going to make it a lot harder to get your Google business profile suspended, which is a big deal, because once you do this and Google's like, no, I've seen the video, I don't need to go ask them to see a video. Usually when you got suspended, Google would ask for this video.
Can you unpack this video for me, Nalini? Because this is the first time hearing of it. It's been, it's been a decade since I was in marketing in this space. So it was all postcards. What is the video? Is it geolocated? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so it's a video on your phone. They want you to walk through. It's about 45 seconds, and there are 3 main categories that they ask you to show them, which is 1, working space and working equipment. So for a lawyer, that's, maybe your diploma's on the wall, that's your desk, there's a conference room, that there's people there, whatever that may be. They want to see the outside of the building to see that it is commercial, that there's signage. It does not say that it has to be your signage, just that there is signage, that it is an office building, right? And then signage is usually a big one. So having something that says your name on the door that goes into your office. So even if that's a suite within, right, your friend's suite or whatever it may be. And then it has to be kind of you walking through it. So those are really, but if you can do that, if you do that 45-second video and you send it from the beginning, then Google is less likely to believe anyone saying this is not a real office. And you don't even have to get into that appeals process, which will be beautiful. But these are now things that you absolutely have to make sure are correct and are there. There's furniture. You can't just have an empty space, right? Whether that's your furniture or your friend's furniture that you would use if you saw a client. But yeah, it's interesting. They are trying very hard to make the verification process easier on them, because Google is inundated with all these support requests. They're sick of it. They don't want to deal with it. They want the easiest process and they want to make it clean. So
I love it. No, that's awesome. Yeah. It seems easier on both fronts. So interesting. That's an awesome piece of information. Thanks, Nalini. So what else can firms then do on their own to make sure that their service areas are added correctly to their Google business profile?
So I think that was really where we were talking about making sure that it is that you're not just putting 20 close by Google markets, but that you're really doing a little bit of research and you're looking at the places where you did used to get the most business from, where your demographics are, where your competitors are not. And obviously too, if you have multiple Google business profiles, figuring out how you don't have to overlap service areas.
Yeah.
If Google Business Profile 1 takes care of that service area, then don't put that service area on your other one, right? Try to get 60 service areas if you possibly can, because they'll allow up to 20. So just being strategic.
And in terms of tools for identifying which service areas might be good, like does Google have an area within Google Business Profiles where you can see service areas mapped? How can firms get in there and experiment with this?
Yeah, so if you don't mind, I can actually show this. Might make more sense. And this is a good one, yeah. So if I share my screen and I choose this window, I'll just do this screen here. And then share. You see in this guy, right? So I used Houston as the example when I talked to you guys. So if I did Houston, and you look here, this is kind of where, and I've explained this one a little bit earlier because it had a lot to do with that November update. You'll notice that Houston has kind of a red outline, right? Prior to 2018, Houston used to have a red pin that would be in the city center of what Google considered to be city center. And this is kind of where I was talking about, if you stood, up here in Acres Home, and that's one of those service areas. This might not be something colloquial, or you stood down here in Greater Hobby area, right? 2 different markets, 2 different humans, and they had said, husband got hurt in a car accident, need a lawyer. Both of those people would see the same 3 results, and they used to be the 3 results that were closest to that red pin. So Google got rid of the red pin, created a red outline of markets, and then created all these little service areas throughout. And each of these service areas now has its own red outline.
So essentially in Google Maps.
So the red outline is the most important piece.
Yeah. And in terms of then you were kind of advising, hey, see what other attorneys are out there. Is that then just doing a Google search with that area by name or by search
so good call.
Attorney? Yeah.
Yes, so you actually could go in and you could do an incognito tab if you're ever searching, right? Because you want to pretend that you are standing in one of these areas. So let's say North Side. So I'd say North Side, Houston, and then injury lawyer. But really what this is doing is pretending you're standing in that red outline and you're only looking up injury lawyer, right? It would be someone not actually typing it in. And what you'll see is it's going to show you just a small piece of that North Side area, right? This is how far Google's going to show. And then these are your 4 that are going to show. It's going to be people that are closest to that little area. If you did Shepherd's Forest, you'd have a similar view. And then the other thing you could do that I really like and is kind of cool, this is a neat trick. I don't know if people have seen this, but let's say I want and care about North Side, right? So I might say that I'm standing right here on the street. You can zoom in as far as you want. I've just put myself as a human here. If you right click, search nearby, and I just looked up injury lawyer.
That's cool. I've never seen that before.
You will now see, if you stood here, there are clearly no injury lawyers up here that are closer to me as a human standing here. It's pulling everybody from the Shady Acres area, right? And the Greater Heights area, and the Northside Village. Yep. So if I were to put an office somewhere, and maybe this is a neighborhood where people live, then maybe I'd be putting myself somewhere over here because there's not a lot of saturation. So you can really truly see saturation of a market by using a couple of those quick, very easy tools.
That is so cool, Nalini. Thank you. Yeah, I feel like that's some pro advice right there. Thank you for that. Cool. Let's go ahead and jump in there. So talk to me a little bit about services, because that's another element of the Google business profile, right?
So services were very interesting. This is something that we saw pop up in July, just a couple of months ago. Services have been a feature or a field that's been around for years. So this is on your front of your Google business profile. You're able to say what you do. So it can be catastrophic accidents, it can be car accidents, different types of practice areas under PI. And then, it can be other practice areas too, whatever. For home services, people would say like plumbing, and I do this kind of tubing and this, all this stuff. So lawyers didn't necessarily put that stuff because they thought it was just for the consumer. Like, what if they go to my website, they're going to know I do all this stuff, right? But I've been saying for years, and this is always something that Google wants. If Google gives you a field, fill it out, because everything that you put there is teaching Google something that it wants to know, right? It didn't create the field for no reason. Think about management. When you create something in the structure of your firm for someone to fill out, and they don't fill it out, you get very upset, right? You're like, I wanted that data for a reason. So think of that as your Google business profile. Finally, in July, what we saw was Google started to show firms who had filled out their service areas in keywords related to those searches. So if you were looking up a car accident lawyer, right, or if you were looking up certain types of services and you had that filled out, we were seeing in a small case study, right, it wasn't extensive, but that firms that had those filled out were showing in the top 3 easier than the people who didn't have them filled in. And then we saw a next level, which was your category. So Google has and this was something that I should have said earlier too, with service areas, when you start to type in a city, it's a drop-down menu. So Google will suggest those service areas, right? Similarly, for category, where you tell Google, you get to choose a primary category for each Google business profile. There's personal injury lawyer, there's divorce lawyer, right? You can't just make up your own title, right? You can't put car accident lawyer. Doesn't exist. So from that drop-down menu, we started to see on the front end, right above the 3-pack, the category was being listed. This happened for about 3 weeks, where you would see that it would say personal injury lawyer. So what was interesting is that if you looked up car accident lawyer, or you looked up catastrophic or dog bite lawyer, all of those terms were really being read by Google as personal injury lawyer. And it was only showing the one type of search, right? So now for people who were niche in their practice areas and there wasn't a category for you, you were getting swept in with all the big names who always show up for PI terms, for injury lawyer. And everybody was like, oh shit. Yeah, because that's a big, that took away all the long tail keywords that you ranked for, took away a bunch of different searches. And it lasted for a few weeks. So we were like, oh, I don't know what's going on here. But if you look, and even if what I just showed, when you look up anything now, any search, the word that is right above the 3-pack is businesses. So they replaced those categories now where everything just says businesses. They realized it was way too different. And I think what it was doing was teaching the AI system the differences between a very broad keyword and the fact that there are all these long tail keywords that consumers are still looking
for. Really interesting.
So your niche practices are safe.
Because it's not better for the consumer for sure, right? I mean, so super interesting too to hear that not all things Google does, are permanently for the worst. Although sometimes it feels that way in digital marketing, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Very
no,
cool. So,
absolutely. And it's to show that they're testing. It's to show
yeah,
that they're testing, right? And they learn, they always sweep far and then they bring it back in. But it's think about what they've just done. What are they trying to figure out? They're trying to figure out, should we always think about bigger terms or should we think about the more niche specific terms that the searcher's looking for? And I think that what they learn is that people don't just want it to all be generalized, right? I'm
yeah.
searching for something specifically. And so that means that it's important, and I think they're learning how to get those longer tail keywords to have their own searches even better.
Yeah, that makes sense. So categories, that's the other element. So what's going on? We touched on it, I think, a little bit just now, right? With the personal
Yes,
injury.
yes,
But how
yes.
is different from services? How should law, when they're filling it out, how should law firms be thinking about this?
So the big talking point here is that as we saw that they were starting to put titles with the categories on the 3-packs, we also noticed that firms who have more than one practice area, so a firm that might be PI and criminal, and they do 50-50, right? What we used to say is, all right, well, you know what, Google's only going to rank you for one. Truth. So you're going to have to pick which one you want, make that your primary category, and then Google allows you to put secondary categories. So you could say you're a criminal, but you know what? It doesn't matter. Right now, these secondary categories are still not ranking necessarily. If you want to rank for your second practice area, you need to go create a second Google Business Profile. You have to make it a practitioner profile. It needs to be a partner or someone you trust is not going to leave you, because these practitioner profiles are owned by the individual. Google will always side with the individual, and the firm will not be able to keep those reviews if that person leaves, right? So it was this
Mm.
whole big thing. People would just say, too much work, I'm just going to rank for one of my practice areas, right? What this update did was allowed Google to actually change what your primary category was saying depending on the search. So if you were a business that does PI and criminal, and somebody searched for injury lawyer, yours would show in the 3-pack as injury law firm. And then if somebody looked up DUI lawyer, yours would show up in the 3-pack, but your primary category would change to criminal lawyer. It was
Very cool.
changing it for you. The secondary categories are starting to be considered. So again, they created that field for a reason. They weren't ready to use it years ago, but they are now. So the awesome thing is, if you guys have second practice areas, try to use your one Google Business Profile. Make sure you add in those secondary categories. And I think that the future is there, even though they're going to reel it in again. I think that's how we're moving towards. They want to get away from practitioner profiles, because why?
Mm-hmm.
It causes way more support tickets, and they
Yeah,
don't want to
that
deal with
makes
it.
a lot of sense. I love following that thread because I feel like that is probably really, really sharp. I like it. So let's talk big picture. So what should firms right now be doing from your perspective to close out their 2022?
Yes. So right now, aside from digital, it's just sitting down with the most important people at your firm who make the decisions on money and on everything, right? And carving out that time. It is so important to sit down and see what you've spent money on this year. Not just what you've spent money on, but actually go back and what have you gotten out of it? And truly, not what you feel like you've gotten out of it. Don't tell me I don't think the phones have rang, right? Go back and look at reports. Use those intake systems, whatever you have, lead docket, anything, Lawmatics, and look at those case management systems. That's why you have these, to go back and truly track everything. If you don't have your reporting set up, that's a big hole. Set it up, right? Take the time right now to set yourself up for success next year. Because if you failed to report this year, why would you let that happen for another year? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Figure out how bad this is that you don't have that data. But sit down and get that data about what you have spent on, what it has really truly returned, and then make smart decisions on how to reallocate that budget next year, or where to put more. Hopefully you have more budget this year. Hopefully you've grown. Figure out which buckets you're putting more money into.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. No, I love that. And I think that I also like bringing it back to our very first thing we spoke about. Now is a really good time to be doing this, because if you get into your data in September, kind of thinking about where you're wrapping up your 2022, you still have 2 months, 3 months to really put things in place and get the ball rolling for next year. So To that point, speaking of 2023, what are some of the things that firms should be thinking about in terms of budget or in terms of strategy?
So one thing that I find that way too many firms, and I think people will be surprised who are on here that maybe haven't thought of it this way, are on how much should you be spending on your business in general, right? So the rule is, there's an actual industry rule, there's a rule of thumb. It's 20% of your revenue. You don't have to share that number with people if you don't want to, but sometimes sharing that number helps you actually break things down, right? So your actual revenue, take 20% of that. That needs to go back into your business. And that's not just for digital marketing. That's for all of your, your referral building too. So drinks, taking people out to drinks, going out to the golf course, all of that has to be figured out. New hires, things like that, right? Anything that's going to help you generate business, whether that's TV, radio, you have different buckets. Of that 20%, I generally say about, if you're going to do digital, then about 10% of your 20% should be spent on digital for a year. Mm-hmm. So now that you have that number, what can I do with that number? Because truly, it's not going to be the same for everybody, depending on your how valuable is your site, right? If your site is graded at using numbers here, a 10, and your competitors in a market you really want to break into are 40s, you're not going to catch up to them in a year. With trust scores, I'm actually using real numbers, but the domain authorities that you're ever going to go up in a year is about 10 on average with SEO. So what you need to do is say, all right, with this bucket of money I have, what market can I take over? Right? What do I have enough for resources and content links, local, whatever it may be, and really be realistic about your strategy. Don't try to spend at the top of your budget for a dream that you think might happen. Spend within your budget for an actual market that you will own and win in 2023. That's the best advice I can give you there. And then the other cool thing is, with money at the end of the year, big tips I've seen just in running businesses, there's tax time, right? And you all have your tax person out there who's telling you got all this extra money here, you got to spend this, maybe I shouldn't spend this. Putting money back into your business before tax is extremely valuable for you, right? So if you have extra money you're looking to spend somewhere, at companies, whether it's TV, digital, maybe you're going to upfront pay for your case management system, whatever it is, anything that is working on building your business counts to prepay for the year. So if it is a product that you have seen the data show has done well by you, then what's the harm in prepaying for a year? There's no harm. And you get that money out and it helps with your taxes. So thinking about that stuff, you cannot do it the last week of the month. Your tax people are upset at you. Don't call them on Christmas Eve.
Right? Working on this Christmas
yes.
Go ahead of it is what you're saying.
Start thinking about this stuff in November or in October. It will help your like vendor teams, your resources, your personal life people happier with you. Now's the time to start thinking about that.
Yeah, I love that suggestion though about really thinking about a strategy that's going to get you into markets that you can win, so that you actually are seeing wins and have something that's achievable next year. That's a really good way of thinking about it and to be breaking it down. I love that. So talk to me about the marketing tools. What are you seeing out there? What are some of the smartest tools out there? And like, there's SEO trackers out there. There's a bunch on the market. Do you have a favorite? Talk to me.
Yeah, so there are, I think the classics are always putting money into their programs to get better. Ahrefs is one of my favorites because it's more about link building, and so they take a lot of their numbers from that. I still enjoy that piece of SEO, but I've seen that they've just done an overhaul and there's a 2.0 version of that recently. So I like that. SEMrush, people have always used forever, and it is timeless. It's going to be great. There's always some new things that are out there. Neil Patel's tool, I always love it, and I think that he's sharp. So I think that he's going to be, updating his tools, and it is so user-friendly for the individual. So if you're a solo out there, taking a look at that, his tool, and it is escaping my mind the name of it, but maybe we can put it in the chat or something after. But his tool is really great. Lots of really cool things out there for content creation. I would say taking tool to mean something even grander, right? Like a resource. A lot of people have invested in virtual assistants this year, I think, especially, and it's become normalized to figure out how to delegate and have someone you trust, someone you've hired, right? But not have to have that overhead in the office. There's also Upworks and places like that where you can get some really great talent for marketing. And so if you're just looking for little pieces and you're bootstrapping it because you're just starting out, we understand you don't have that budget, but Gabriela has all this information too about what she's learned in the industry. I'm happy to talk to any size firm and help you grow where you are right now. But these tools are really helpful for those solos out there who should not be spending thousands on digital, thousands on TV and radio. You're not there yet. Don't do it. Don't overextend yourself.
Yeah. And to that point, I mean, let's talk about the Google business profile. I mean, you've got to claim it. If you haven't, if there's anyone sitting on here and you don't have a claimed Google business profile, run, don't walk, right? As soon as we finish this webinar, put in photos, put in videos, fill out every field as accurately as you possibly can, add in your service areas. And, a component of that after that is collecting those reviews. And the more reviews you have, the better, right? I understand there's an element of locality to it, but what weight does Google give those reviews outside of just the consumer seeing them, Nalini?
Yeah, and that's exactly what you just said, outside the consumer. So there's both benefit from the SEO perspective. It's very important because with these service areas as well, that's one of the other ways Google is able to understand, do you really help folks in that service area? If you get reviews from people sitting in their homes in that market, then it is an extra piece, an extra endorsement for your business, for Google to say, yeah, if somebody else needs help there, you've had 5 people leave a review already from there, right? The reviews are also looked at by the words. So they take keywords. If something's been said more than 3 times in reviews on your Google business profile, Google now associates that word with your business. So if that word is looked up, Google throws you into the ring and says, you know what, this one's helped 3 or more people on that topic. They're so important. Such good factors and indicators come out of reviews. And for the consumer, once you actually rank, that's the biggest piece. Is we can get you to rank. We can't get people to like your business and like who you are to want to click through and convert.
That's up to you guys.
But that's what reviews are for.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's what reviews are for.
And to that point, there's lots of great services. Obviously, again, if you're bootstrapping it, hey, a call, a text to that client after you finish helping them. There's a lot of great ways to do that. If you're a little bit bigger and you want to harness technology, like we just built an integration with Connect that I know offers this service. There's Podium out there. There's, other kind of Yeah. So that I think is a worthy investment, especially if you're looking to grow your business into something bigger. Putting things like that in place now can be really helpful. Yeah,
I agree. You're right. It's a tool.
Yeah, getting up to 500 reviews is, you're not just sitting there as the partner texting every client that walks through the door.
And what's the point if they're all like fake or they're all 500? It's going to get you in trouble. If you did put money into your Google business profile to get it to rank, it's going to end up, getting suspended. And then where's your phone calls? You're not getting them because you're not showing. So it's not worth it to do things nefariously either. Just build them naturally, build them properly.
Yeah. So I have a question for you, Nalini, that's not on the deck, but just how do you stay on top of all this stuff? Like, does Google announce changes? Where can people, other than by following you on the conference circuit, how can people stay up to date on this stuff themselves? Or is there a way?
Yeah, so there's a number of people that you could just follow. So my Twitter feed is sports. It's all kinds of sports craziness. And then it's Google. So there are people that you can follow. Google has been better about saying, here, an update is coming out. But for me, it's been really, really awesome. And this is an amazing thing to be able to say that I used to go and look at case studies of people that we really love and admire. Sterling Sky is one of them. She's, Joy is amazing, and a lot of people have heard that name, and you read her blogs on search engine journals and search engine land and things like that. But we have gotten to a point where we do service over 200 law firms across the country. We service almost every state across the country, and now I have data. And so we are able to do these case studies within our own clients and come up with the data that we read about. And we've been able to publish case studies. So just looking at our own data of how Google has changed is one of the ways that we've been able to have greater insight and really cool trackings. And so our presentations, as you guys see us, have gone from here's the 4 fundamentals to here's a timeline of how we've been tracking Google for 4 years. And here's some of our case studies. And so it's been really exciting because it is follow the folks at Google, follow the people who know what's coming out, but follow the SEO folks out there who have the data. Follow the companies that have this data and this research, because it's the only thing. We put our research together with the other companies and we figure it out. So that's how it's learned. Yeah.
And I cannot recommend Nalini and Seth enough. If you've been to a conference, you had to see them or you've seen them, and next time you're on the circuit, please do check them out. If they're speaking at a show, you won't be disappointed. Also, one of the things that impressed me last time I sat in on your speech, there's so much engagement often from the audience, people who are sitting in that room, who are really thinking about their business, really growing. And there's just such an extraordinary exchange of ideas and questions and commentary that comes in. I really enjoyed that last time I saw you speak. So predictions, Nalini, what do you see in in your glass sphere here?
So I always think that Google is about their local 3-pack. My biggest prediction was that there would be a local 5-pack and organic would go down. We're starting to see local 5-packs since October. So that's a real thing that's coming soon. But my newest thing that I'm on is this video reel. I have seen it when you search brands. So if you search your firm's name and you have this nice, pretty branded page that comes up, sometimes there is a section above your organic, even above your website, right, that has your YouTube videos. And it's just, what you've posted. And it's usually people who have a real good channel. But I predict that in the next year or so, there will be a video reel, maybe under the LSAs, maybe under the local 3-pack as well, but it will be answers to your questions, because you're marking up videos. They're FAQs, they're answering questions, and they are what are going to be clicked instead of any kind of organic top 10. People are not going into a website. They are going to go to the YouTube, because YouTube is owned by Google. But the thing is, you still need those videos embedded on a website that talks to the bot. So the website is important, even if people are not going to go to it.
Got it. Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I like it.
I'm interested to see it. Yeah.
You've heard it here. And we're gonna come back. We're gonna come back September of 2023 and see. But Nalini, I think it's super sharp, because obviously that's the direction that this whole world is going, right? With what we've seen TikTok take over in the last 2 years, and in terms of marketing and consumer presence, for better or for better or worse. But it's definitely the way that the consumer market's moving, and Google's trying to please consumers. So that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yep. Yeah. And we're just lazy people, right? If we can click on a video and it can answer my question and I don't have to read, I've actually learned that whole generations don't know cursive handwriting anymore. So whole generations are just not going to even know how to read. They're just going to know how to listen. They're going to understand English, and they're going to be able to listen to videos. We just won't be reading anymore.
It's so funny. I always laugh. I feel like I'm the exception to the rule. If I can read a blurb, great. I don't if you're gonna tell me an answer or you have to scroll down to the page to get your answer, I'm out. I don't know. We'll see. I guess I'm getting old.
Absolutely.
Before you're up, here's how you can reach out to Nalini and learn more about BluShark. People, we have a little bit of extra time, so if you have some questions, chime in here. As you can tell, Nalini just has an amazing breadth of knowledge on this. But can you tell me a little bit? You told us a little bit about BluShark to start, but what kind of firms do you work with? Do you specialize in certain markets or your exclusive markets? Like, how do you guys operate?
Yeah, absolutely. So we work with any law firm that is business to consumer because that makes the most sense to be trying to optimize for Google. Someone has to be looking for you, right? I need a divorce lawyer, I need an immigration lawyer. But from that extent, yeah, it's family, immigration, trust and estate, divorce, criminal, PI, all practice areas, all sizes too, quite honestly. While our bread and butter is absolutely those mid to high level markets, and we work on 2 to 3 markets at a time, identifying those service areas. So more so, your 2 to 10 lawyer firm, we absolutely help and work with the smaller guys who are just getting started, people who are just creating a firm. We do websites only as part of it's a silver shark is what we call it, but it's a foundational product, and so we're able to actually get you a website that's
That's great.
SEO found. Yeah. So there's, we work with everybody on that front. And then we do paid ads too, but our bread and butter, like I said, is that organic. It's the local
Mhm.
3-pack is what we're going for when we
Awesome.
work with people and doing that research.
We have a question came in about local service ads. We have a attendee here who put the budget
Yep.
up to the max and 0 calls. What are your thoughts on that?
All right. So you got a real problem, buddy. We need to figure out why that's happening to you. So LSAs have happened for 2 years now, but the guidelines have come out since December. And even since December, a lot of those things have changed. So there are actual ways that your business, your campaign could have been hit and or no longer liked by Google. There's also rules that they've said, here's how you're going to get into the top 3 now. And other folks have had that information and they're doing it. So it's not just making sure that you're putting that to the max. And I'd wonder what your max is. I'm hearing about 300,000 per week is the max if you're putting it there. It's also not just about budget, it's about making sure that when you do get a call and you've answered and it's turned into a case sign, that you're marking that in the platform, right? That you're utilizing the review platform, the review section in that platform. I'm happy to kind of talk to you and look at it on, because it also matters what market you're in and what practice area. A lot of times the markets have gone up and down, but I will say that we're seeing our clients are spending anywhere from 4 to 25,000 a month on LSAs. So there's money to be spent, and there's ways to optimize yourself to be on there. And it sounds like you've had success and then you hit a wall. So I would be interested to see what's changed. And maybe we look at LSA accounts if you want to give us access to that, and we can audit it for you for free too.
Well,
Just to
I
kind of
can
give you
imagine
suggestions.
that Zach and Nalini, you guys could nerd out on this quite a bit. So I hope you two connect because I think you'd
Yeah,
enjoy talking for sure.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, if anyone has any questions that they have after this, is the best way for them to reach out is by email, Nalini?
Yeah, you can email me. That's a simple way there. We also do reports if you guys want just to look at what your site looks like. Those are free. I can give you my cell phone number, at which you can text. I don't answer at all times of the day, but I will answer text often. That's 202-997-0511.
I like it. Brave woman, Nalini.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. Nalini, thank you so much. You're just an extraordinary guest. We're going to have you on for sure in 2023 sometime just to circle back, check in on what's new with Google, what's coming next. We'll see where those video reels stand. And again, if you ever have a chance to sit in on one of her sessions or meet her live, please say hello. She'll be so happy to talk to you, and we'll be happy to have you bend her ear. So really recommend it. And for those of you that joined us today, thank you so much, and can't wait to be here with you again next time.
And thank you so much for having me. This has been awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Bye.
All right, bye.